Error and occur. This is usually go live. We are live. Hello and welcome to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez. I am a principal in search of wisdom, and I have found productivity to be a great tool for success. Today, I have the great and distinguished honor of interviewing John Bogie, who is a fourth grade teacher, writer, and guitar player in Highland Park, Illinois. John Bogie, who are you?
I think you nailed it on the head there. I'm also a father, a fan of comic books, science fiction, and anything that sort of shines a light on the future and gives hope that the future has no limits. I think that's really why I like science fiction so much. It is just a fun way of looking at what could be.
Beautiful. I can't wait to ask you the questions about what you read. But let's start with, can you please walk us through your professional trajectory up to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Evanston, Illinois, and I always wanted to be president, and from a very young age. And so I said, well, if I'm going to be president, I should go to law school. So after I graduated from Albion College, I went to Chicago Kent College of Law and hated it. Oh, I was miserable. I just was bored. I was uninterested. And so I left during my first year. And my mom had been a school social worker in Skokie at a school called Middleton. And I had worked at the daycare a little bit there. And she got me a job as a teacher's aide. And I loved it. The rest kind of just flowed naturally. I got my master's at night, worked there for two and a half years, substituted, got a job in North Chicago where teaching fifth grade. And that first classroom is so special. Those kids were wonderful. To this day, I still reflect on them and my experiences. Um, it, it was just a wonderful opportunity. Then I moved to Glenview, where I taught fourth grade for 10 years. And during that time, I took on a lot of leadership roles in the building. And my principal was like, you'd make a good principal. So I left and became an assistant principal, then a co interim principal, then a principal for 3 years. And we did a lot of good work. We really did. But there was a part of me that was feeling unsatisfied. And again, it was that feeling like in law school where I don't think this is for me. I was fortunate enough to make some connections in Highland Park, North Shore District 112. And I was introduced to a woman, Claire Kowalczyk, who was a principal of Lincoln School at the time. And she was amazing. And I interviewed for a fourth grade teaching job again. And it really wasn't an interview. It was more like this wonderful 3 hour conversation about curriculum, about student growth and development, social emotional learning. And she and I just clicked. And I worked with her for 3 years there. Then a woman came for uh, Gene Bannis and John Sprangers took over for a couple years. They were amazing. And it was a phenomenal, wonderful time in my life. Sadly, the numbers at Lincoln went down and they closed the school, and these things happen. And that was really hard for me. But then I remember something a lot of people say, but I had heard actually Dave Letterman say this. When something happens, that's not exactly what you want, don't get down on yourself. Think of it as an opportunity. And that's how I looked at moving to Wayne Thomas, where I currently am teaching fourth grade. It's really been a wonderful opportunity. And the things, I mean, I just love Wayne Thomas. It's the diversity of the kids, the backgrounds they come from. I mean, we have the kids who come from the military base. They're just wonderful. To a T, they work hard. They're great kids. And the community has been so supportive. The parents are just amazing. I'm so lucky.
Beautiful.
And here I am, I'm sort of looking at the next 10 years of my career, where we're going, and we're working on a lot of fun things with the kids, and every day is an adventure.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's unpeel that onion a little bit. What would you say? is the moment when you realize, um, I really like doing this, right? When you became a teacher, and you were teaching students, and you were coming from that law, from those aspirations, and there was a shift in your interests. How would you describe that, and how do you bring that today to the classroom?
So it's this is the greatest job ever. It's full of satisfaction, such wonderful moments when the kids get it and that light bulb goes on. When I was back when I worked in the daycare, boy, in the 90s, I used to work with the preschoolers a lot, and there were preschool boys, and I collect comic books. I have since I was a kid. And at that time, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was really popular. And I actually had some of the older comics that are a little more adult. But these kids would come running up and want me to tell them Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stories. And I started to make them up. And they'd sit around mesmerized by these stories. And I think some cases I was just recounting the cartoons, but they loved it. And that made me feel so satisfied and just happy to meet their needs. And I didn't realize it at the time. I couldn't verbalize it, but every year, every student I've worked with, there are those moments when they get it, and that's what I live for. I saw that in North Chicago. I saw it in Winkleman School in Glenview. And now I see it at Lincoln, and then I saw it it feels like every day at Wayne Thomas. Uh, I have friends who work in the corporate world, and they're so talented and they're so good at their jobs. But, it's working with kids, just seeing them make those steps, those progress. It's a different kind of thing where you get a little more different kind of satisfaction, and it's just what I live for.
Beautiful. Let me tell you, Mr. Bogie, for those that don't know, Mr. Bogie's school and my school are, we're neighbors, literally a 1 minute walk from each other. However, we don't tend to see each other often, but I do get to hear a lot of Mr. Bogie because of the students that come from his school. I always ask when part of my relationship building strategy is always asking, who is your favorite teacher? And his name almost always comes out. Kudos, Mr. Bogie.
Thank you.
Question, geeky question. Who is your favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle character and why?
You know what? I always loved Donatello, the machine, the computer, the tech guy. I always love that character in any sort of science fiction or adventure. He seems to be a little undervalued by the rest of the team, but he's essential, and he really doesn't care about. He wants to get the job done. He gets joy from making the machines do what he needs to do. So I've always loved that character that's rather undervalued like that. And I see that repeated again and again in stories. And that character, I feel like they always have a great backstory too.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. For me, I started with Leonardo because Leo was the leader. But there
Hmm.
was a time growing up that I wanted to give up on leadership and I wanted to be Michelangelo. And then I found Michelangelo, then so irresponsible, and I went back to be a fan of Leo. Uh, so fun to talk about this. So one more follow-up question. What lessons did you take from the administration world in education when you return back? Like
Hmm.
your story sounds like when Jordan went to play baseball and came back to basketball and brought a bunch of lessons. What
Hmm.
lessons did you bring, and how did that make you a better educator?
Uh, it brought me a lot of humility and understanding of what goes on beyond my classroom walls and the pressures that administrators feel. And I think it really improved my relationships with the principals, the district office staff with whom I work now, to have that understanding. It's, they say to really understand someone, you should walk a mile in their shoes. Well, I did. And it, so like, I see sometimes teachers or people come in and they're they think the sun rises and sets by them, and it really doesn't. Team, team, team. And I know I couldn't do my job as well as I do without the many people who support our whole community.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Great reflection. So let's talk about reading and books. And of course, it could include anything that has words. If you will have to gift two pieces of literature, one
Mhm.
fiction, one nonfiction, which one will those be and why?
For nonfiction now, it's The Logic of English by I think it's Denise Lid is how Lide is how she might say it. This book, our principal, my current principal, Michael Rodrigo, gave it to me. It has opened me up to something and helped me articulate what I've seen in education for a while. We have these the pendulum kind of swings in reading and education, balanced literacy, structured literacy. Um, as a fourth grade teacher, I've seen kids come up for years, and sometimes they seem to be a little weak in certain areas. And this book is all about the English language and phonics, how we develop, how the brain works. It pairs in very nicely with professional development we're doing right now. I am just fascinated by it. I've always loved languages since high school, and studying the Romance languages and learning about that just fascinated me. The connections between Spanish, French, Portuguese, Romanian, and Italian.
Italian.
I love the way languages evolve. And in college, I took Japanese for a year, so this really pairs in well with kind of something that interests me a lot. And it's helped me with my students now because they come up and they're a little weak in like silent E. How does silent E work in a letter? How does it affect the sounds? So now it's helped me learn how to focus my instruction. More importantly, we have this wonderful half-hour success block where students can get targeted instruction. I'm able to do those things, and I use this book as a tremendous resource. So I'm a big fan of uncovering the logic of English. For nonfiction, I've been reading comics since I was a kid. And in the 1980s, a comic came out called The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. And it is a gritty, sort of adult look at Batman when he's in his 50s and he comes out of retirement. And the writing was so good. I read it a couple times a year. And it 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 ends with this scene where Batman is sitting around with Robin, and he's sort of brought in all these other young people and Green Arrow, who's one of my favorite superheroes. And they're planning how they're going to build a future in Gotham. And he says out loud the line, "Hurry up, we got to get these things ready. We don't have a lot of time." But in his mind, thinks, "No, we have all the time in the world." And I've already expanded that in my mind to say we have all the time in the world, time to teach and learn and grow and be the best person we can be. And I love that sentiment. And I think about that, especially in August and September at the beginning of the year, when we're getting to know the kids, when we're looking at, oh, the map scores are coming in. Oh, I've seen this in the classroom. Oh, they wrote this essay. And in my mind, I can plot out, okay, I know how this kid's going to be successful. I got a plan. And it's just a wonderful feeling. So those are two books I highly recommend.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm highly curious if you had to pick one comic book series, which one would that be?
Oh, a series. I love Green Arrow. I love the guy because he's got no superpowers. He's just good with a bow and arrow. And the writers they've had over the years have been amazing. Sometimes the companies can be a little protective of the big characters like Batman or Superman, but they've allowed the writers to really have a lot of fun with Green Arrow. Another one is Daredevil. He's from Marvel
Mm,
Comics. I love the fact that he's blind and just is so passionate about helping those in need. And that's another one of my. And then the Incredible Hulk. I ever
that's my
since the
favorite.
70s, Bill Bixby and the Incredible Hulk show, I've just loved that story character.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm sure comic reading give you a special sensibility to bring into education, because it takes so much art to put words into beautiful pictures in a way that is captivating. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate that. Let's do a little pause and celebrate the Teach Better community.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Okay, John. So, can you please share with us who is or who are your biggest influences?
You know, I got to start with my mom and dad. My mom is a school social worker. She got me into the business, so to speak, and I just it gives me sort of a she's a therapist. It gives me a therapist perspective. I try to run my classroom, according to what I learned from her growing up of listening, being fair, being patient. And then my father, who is just he was in sales his whole life, and I don't know, he's just so supportive. Uh, when I wanted to learn bass guitar, he bought me this enormous amp to go with my guitar as a gift because he wanted to support me. Whatever I did, he has always been there. So I try to reflect on that with my students. And as I got into education, I worked at a camp called Circle M Day Camp, and the owners were Bob and Marcy Brower. The camp where it was in Wheeling, out by what we used to call Palwaukee Airport. Now it's a Chicago Executive Airport. And Bob and Marcy were former educators, and they had this camp that ran as a non-competitive camp, and it was they really believed in the 5 stages of group dynamics of how a group evolves. And so your summer camp group would evolve through this, and you'd watch them and you'd do a lot of reflection on it. I do the same with my classroom and apply those lessons there. At the beginning of the year, we're exploring, we're getting to know each other. Then we get into sort of the storming period where they kind of test you. They're really just finding their role, who they are. And that lasts till about Halloween. And Halloween's kind of a big turning point. It's a lot of stress for kids, actually. What are you going to wear? Who are you going to go trick-or-treating with? Then after Halloween, things are normal. And they leave for winter break. And they're like, okay, this is pretty good. I know this. I get the routine. But they come back from winter break, and man alive, they do their best work from January up until May. And it just keeps better and better. I got to tell you, I'm getting essays from these kids on their big writing assignments that are incredible. Like some of them are doing 8-paragraph essays filled with details. I just couldn't ask for more. But we get to May, and usually the weather will turn about mid-May where it feels summer. And they start to realize school is ending. And we get to the final stage of, I call it destruction, although that's maybe a bit much, but whether you love school or you hate school, the end is a change. And it all affects us differently. Throughout the year, we talk about these different stages, especially when we get to the final stage. And, we talk about things like that we want to remember about 4th grade, that we want to take in our suitcases with us. And it makes the end of the year go smoother, but it also helps them remember what they want to take from the class. And I really it's a joyous time of celebration. A little sad to see them go at the end of the year, maybe a little more for the teacher. I mean, I usually cry the last day of school. It's who I am, and I know it. It's so wonderful to see all the growth, and then see them. It's kind of like well, at Wayne Thomas, we have these ducks that come every year, and they nest in our courtyard, and then they leave, and the mother duck has to take her babies and let them go, and I have to do the same thing. And it's always with pride and a little bit of sadness to see them go.
Wow, wow. I can tell that you teach with a lot of love. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Okay, John, as you know, we all at some point believe that we are not good enough, that we're not going to be able to accomplish certain tasks. And psychologists call that imposter syndrome. How do you address this?
When I was in high school and college, I was on the swim team, and you get up there on the blocks, and I'd be scared. As soon as I dove in the water, it just all went away. I try to apply that at my as a teacher. I can work myself up. I can think about all the things that could go wrong in the day. But once I get going, something just clicks where it's like, okay, we're in the zone, we're going, the game's on. And I'm able to compartmentalize it. Now, the only time that doesn't work or hasn't worked in the past is when you know, something messes up the rhythm, or something. Sometimes I'll have like observers come in and I'm like, oh, I got to stop what I'm doing and you know uh go over to the person and say, oh, hey, welcome to our classroom, that kind of a thing. That's really not the case now with our current principal or assistant principal. I think that's my level of growth, but they also work very hard to connect with me and make me feel comfortable. Uh, but I remember, back in Glenview, one time I got observed by 10 people at once. We had done a year-long Japanese lesson study, and I got
Mm.
picked to present the final lesson. And we all have our tells. My ears turn red, my neck turns red. My, you know, I and but what gets me through too is also the planning. I've laid out a hard plan of what I want to do, but I know I'm also the quarterback and I may need to call the audible and change things as we go along. Every year I get better and better at that. And it's planning, really. Planning helps on it. But I do get home at night and I reflect on the day and I'm like, oh, that could have gone better. I could have done this. And although that might be a little unnerving, it actually makes me a better teacher, that level of reflection. And I think year after year just makes things improve.
Beautiful. Let's talk about lesson planning. How do you lesson plan, and what lessons have you learned?
Uh, I with every lesson, I like to think of it as I use the I can statements. They're pretty popular. I always say, what do I want the kids to be able to do? And yes, I can have a fancy objective that says students will understand the fundamentals of reducing fractions, but I'm like, when I put it on the board, I say I can reduce fractions. It's got to be pretty straightforward for the kids. And from there, then how do I want them to do it? And again, we're going to play a game about reducing fractions. Okay, that's pretty simple to them. You don't want to make it too complicated. And then the how are they going to know if they met the objective or the I can statement? I want them to be able to say, oh, it's simple. I'm going to do an exit activity. I'll do an exit slip. Maybe it's the essay I'm writing, but knowing that this is going to show that I've met the objective. Uh, it's nice because then they can refer back to the I can statement. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? So I did that for for a while since coming to Highland Park. And then I started to put my lesson plans on a tight double-sided piece of paper and give it to the students. And
Wow.
essentially, I'm giving them my lesson plans. I started giving it to parents too, uh, because they should all know what's going on. They should all know to what we're working towards. And it's made a huge difference. I find students are more comfortable when they're holding a detailed schedule. I have little check boxes they can check off as we go along. It has the objectives. It has supplies they need to take out. So that level of planning, I think has made a big difference in my instruction. We call it the TCOB, taking care of business. In my class, everything
Mm.
has to have a unique and funny name. It seems like we call the bathroom the water closet. We call the water fountain the bubbler. I took the bubbler from Wisconsin, so people who are from Wisconsin, they're just amazed that I call it that.
That's, I mean, I am getting to see why you're a legend when the students come to Northwood and they talk about you. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about, I believe you're a writer. Can you tell us about your experience writing, perhaps what you're working on, and of your practice?
Sure. So the small project right now, which I really have only outlined, I'm trying to write a book about my experiences in teaching, my ideas, how the year flows. It's kind of going to be a survival guide for teachers, for parents, for students. really reflecting on sort of the intermediate grades, third, fourth, and fifth. I think a lot of time they get overlooked. There's so much focus on the primary. Oh, we have to get them to learn to read, all these things. And then you get to the upper grades and expanding that knowledge, but really sort of those intermediate grades I want to focus on. And right now I have the idea, I have sort of 10 quotes I've either written or I've taken from other people that are going to help me reflect on how the year goes. One of them I took from Spider-Man, although and Stan Lee, it was used for years. With great power comes great responsibility. And so to me, right now, I think of that as sort of I'll call it my August quote. When we're going back to school as teachers, as educators, we need to reflect that we have tremendous opportunity to make these young people the best versions of themselves they can be. So
Beautiful.
I've had, and so that's I generally work on the writing over the summer. So that's moving slower than I'd like. But the other book I've written, and I tell it orally. I have notes and everything, and I have to really put it on paper. My students want me to. It's a book called Princess Ellaway, and it's about a girl who is born as a very mean princess, and she is lacking attention. And although she's rich and has everything, she doesn't have the love and attention she wants from her parents. And one day she's visited by a creature who's half elf, half orc, who promises to give her everything she wants if she holds a marble for a year. And she ends up becoming a wizard and having all sorts of adventures. The kids see her grow through the first 2 books. She gets married. At the end of the second book, she has a son. And then, I don't want to spoil. Then she leaves. We'll just say she leaves for a couple of books. And then the story focuses on her son. The reason I switch it like that is because I want the students in my classes, I tell this, say, oh, there's a girl in the book. I could be that girl. And I never tell them what she looks like. I remember say she doesn't have blonde hair and blue eyes necessarily. She could, but she could be any race. She could have any hair color. Same with her son who's born. And then as he grows up, he doesn't have magical powers. He has trouble making friends, but he finds this great teacher who teaches him to everything, basically. There are a lot of adventures. There's a lot of sort of monsters and stuff that they have to defeat. But it's really about these characters growing. And there's Princess Ellaway. There's her son, Prince Connor. There's a character named Goshi, who's the wizard teacher. They all sort of have things that they have to figure out. So it's going to be 5 books. And the kids love it. Year after, I start telling it in April typically, and I tell it every day till the end of the year. Excuse me. One day we'll get it. One day I'll get it published.
You should, absolutely. How do you create a draft or some sort of a timeline of what's going to happen, or you go as the story goes? What happens behind the scenes in that brain of yours?
So I do a timeline, and I say, okay, I started this story writing it back in the 90s, and I was just getting my master's, and I realized there aren't a lot of good books with girls as the primary character. So I said, okay, let's make it a girl. Let's see how she evolves. Well, what's her problem? I knew a girl in college who told me that when she was little, she was very demanding, and it would tell funny stories how she would try to boss her parents around. I thought, well, what if that made a great character? And then I had a friend who she's someone I really look up to as an adult. She's she works for Northwestern University, and I thought, she's such a nice person. What if this horrible little child grew up to be an amazing, kind-hearted person? What would it take? And I said, if she were to just stop talking for a year and was forced to listen, that would be, and learn and grow from that would be a great story. So I'm like, okay, well, I like science fiction. I like magic and fantasy. How can we make this happen? And then I think of ideas from the millions of books I have. I get inspired by them. There's a lot of a series of comics called Vertigo Comics. They're adult ones, but they're a lot of fantasy adventures, and I get inspired by things like that. Of course, Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings is amazing. Um, so just and that's but for me, all that is kind of off to the side a little bit. It's about how the character grows and change. And that's really what I want to see in these stories. So they all have a problem. And I tell my students that, look, if the character didn't have a problem, it'd be boring. We want to see them resolve it. And it also has to reflect our life. So when we get to the fourth book, it's called Goshi. The teacher character is me. It's pretty obvious. I say, well, he's bald. He's, and it's about my experiences in teaching, how I got into it. And well, instead of being in law school, I was a warrior. And I left being a warrior to go learn to be a wizard, because I think wizards in a lot of stories are the greatest teachers. And the wizard college I go to is named after the camp I worked at, and it's stuff like that. So it's a lot of taking my life and making it sort of fantasy and magical.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness, I will read those books. Awesome. That's I can't wait. Thank you for sharing those. Let's talk a little bit about productivity. As you know, this is something that is important for everyone who succeeds, but it looks so different for each person. What does it look for you? How do you get organized before the stage opens and you do your art?
You ever watch? I love the TV show MASH. Growing up, my parents watched it. I watched it with them, and there was this thing called triage where they'd sit there and they say, "Okay, this patient has to go first. This has to go second. I got time to do this, but I don't have time to do this. I'm going to have to ask a friend for help." And I didn't realize it, but as I've grown professionally, that's kind of how I approach getting organized. I say, okay, this has to get done first. So that lesson plan I give the kids, the TCOB, that has to be done first. So I'll sit down at night and do that, and I can get that done in about 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. And then I say, okay, what else needs to be done? Well, we're going to have to do the grading. That's going to have to be done because you got to know where the kids are at. Then and going from that, there may be things like inputting things into our database system. And then you kind of say, okay, well, I've got everything ready for tomorrow. I've got my lesson plans, got things graded. I need to move on to sort of larger projects. Maybe I want to, maybe I'm working on something with my team. Maybe I'm doing something for the building. In May, for example, I run our building's regatta. We have boat races. We make boats. I have an aqua track that was I got through a grant. So a lot of fun, big projects. So that kind of that's sort of my third level of getting organized. That works extremely well for me. I like to come in to the school day with my plan time not tied down to lesson planning or necessarily. I usually grade pretty consistently during it, but I like to have it open to work on those larger projects if possible. Now, on the flip side of that, that requires that all my duties at home as a father are taken care of. So it might be 7 in the evening when I'm doing these things, and my kids have done their homework. We've had dinner, and sort of have like an hour-long work period at home, silent reading period, and that's when I find I can be very productive. But it is hard sometimes because things will happen. Someone will get sick and need to go to the doctor. My parents who live near me, they'll need me to do something, and so you gotta. It's kind of like those hot dog balloons, and you squeeze one end, the other end gets bigger. It's like, okay, well, I'm taking away from here. It's gonna have to come back down over here. So I try to build in sort of flex time like that, where if I have time, I'll sit down and watch TV or something with my wife. But otherwise, I may have to end up doing work if the balloon got squeezed at one end.
John, let me ask you how being a father has influenced you as a teacher and as a teacher as a father.
I remember when I first started, some parents would say, well, you'll understand when you're a parent yourself. And I always smiled and said, yeah, I hope one day to be able to. And, and it really does change your perspective. there's a simple thing with homework. I give homework out on Friday. I give a packet, and it's not due until the following Friday. Everything they need is there. That way, because I know how busy kids are. I really know now because I have to get to my daughter to soccer 3 times a week. My other daughter has choir. It's just they're you want to be involved in part of their lives, and the parents feel the same way. So if they could get it done over the weekend or have that advanced ability to get these things done, it's going to make it more beneficial to them. It's also, you understand, the words you use with parents are so critical. Um, you don't, it just gives you a larger appreciation. I've seen colleagues in another district use describe a student to a parent not in the most tactful way. And this was about 15 years, maybe even 20 years ago. And I thought, boy, if someone said that to me about my kids, even if it were true, I thought, oh, that's so harsh the way you said it. There are babies. Even when they're 20 years old, there are babies. And, it helps me appreciate that. So.
Beautiful. Tell me, what are your thoughts about how social media and group chats and all that kind of stuff? What have you seen? How is this influencing what we do and the troubles that we have to address? And what are your thoughts?
I'm going to be a little maybe conservative here. I'm not sure, but I really feel like social media should be like driving. You should almost have a license to get it. We should, and I don't know how you would do this, but I would love to see kids have to be 21 to use social media. I I don't. It's just it. I don't see them benefiting from it, and there are benefits, but they're outweighed by all the negatives. And every day, countless stories. I'm sure I've heard from talking to my friends in administration over the years. I know, I'm sure you have, horror stories about kids
Mhm.
getting caught up in just the worst things. Um, these smartphones we have are amazing tools. Holy cow. I just can't believe it sometimes when I reflect back to how things were in the 70s when I was born. But they're just not ready for it. And my mom, the social worker, would say kids don't understand the permanency of their actions. That when they do some of these things on the internet, it is forever. I tell my fourth graders this. You think you can delete something from the internet, but you really can't. And it's once it's there forever. It never goes away. Um, I hope they keep that lesson. It's a lesson I never had to learn, and I
Correct.
was able to grow up and make mistakes, and that's being a kid, is making mistakes, learning from them, growing. Uh, and so I don't see social media giving kids the opportunities to make mistakes and grow. And I would rather just see it go away for kids.
I concur. Yeah, I concur with you. It is so hard for adults to accept rejection and being liked for every
Yeah,
post. With children, it's so difficult, and it's really creating another pandemic of
it is.
children going through this. Thank you for sharing that. John, what do you do? I know you're a guitar player. Tell us about your experience with guitar. I remember one time I was teaching and I was a Spanish teacher, and a parent told me, "Oh, I'm sure you play guitar." I said, "No, I don't," and the parent was so disappointed. So that was something I always wanted to do. Tell us about your experience.
I come from a pretty musical family. Although my dad doesn't play an instrument, he's a huge booster. My mom sang in the church choir, played piano and flute. We always had to take a lesson. We were always taking lessons in an instrument in my house. And I switched around. What did I start with? Piano, guitar, then trumpet, then tuba. That was awesome. Then in college, I went back to guitar and bass guitar. My brother is professional musician. He lives in Brooklyn, and he is a woodwind, saxophone, flute, uh, clarinet player. He does everything. He's been on Grammy nominated albums. He's toured with bands like Arcade Fire, and he's always supported me. And, you know, he helped me realize guitar is such a wonderful instrument because you can kind of teach it to yourself. And it's light, it's great for the classroom. My first and second grade teacher had a piano in the classroom, and that was cool. Uh, so I've always had that idea of what music can bring to the classroom. So, you know, I'm not very good. I know a lot of chords and I know how to go to the website, find the chords, but I have an auto tuner. The kids think it's fascinating and they love it. It's a lot of fun. And so we make up songs. I'll take a pop song and change the lyrics or rock songs. My sort of main song, it's called Godzilla's All Right. It's I took the guitar chords and the changed the words from a song by the Who called "The Kids Are All Right," and it's about the monster Godzilla. It's funny, and but other songs we do are like camp songs. There's one called "Desperado." Not the Eagles song. This is our own camp version. It's very silly about a cowboy who goes to Great America and gets into trouble. And a lot of my songs just they're meant to be silly, funny, get the kids engaged. It just it's like, oh, I get Mr. Bogie. We're gonna sing songs on the guitar. That's gonna be fun. And I think every teacher should have a thing that makes them unique and fun. And the kids are gonna say, I get to go to that teacher because at the end of the year, we do the big puppet project where we make our own puppet shows and our own puppets. I knew a teacher who did that once. It was awesome. So you know that's a big part of it why I bring it into the classroom. You know, if I didn't go into teaching, I would probably work somewhere in the music industry. I feel like probably in well, if not playing, maybe producing and editing music. I just it's such a part of my soul and who I am. People say, well, what do you like? I literally like everything except for pop music. I it's fine, but like I'm not a fan of the the hit channels or the B96, but I love everything else. I love.
So, John, you have to go to an island and you can
Yeah.
only take one song with you that is going to play over and over and over and over. Which one is that one song?
Uh Probably Baba O'Reilly by the Who. I love the way they incorporated the violin. I love the I can play the bass line. It just I hear it and I find inspiration in it. It's it just strikes a chord with me. I don't know. Music to me, it's about emotion. It's about passion, and you'll hear a certain good musical pattern, and you're just like, wow, that's it for me. And I'm lucky. I hear that every day. So
Beautiful. Thank you. John, you finished teaching, your kids are asleep, wife is away. It's John's time. What do you do for fun?
uh, pro- probably either read comic books. I will. I have watch TV. I have some sort of a eclectic shows I like that no one else is really a fan of, and sometimes old anime cartoons from the 70s. There's this one called Battle of the Planets I really like. I'm not sure if anyone remembers that. Uh, Sometimes I love taking my dog for walks. We go to the dog park as much as we can. She's a big part of my life, and just find time to unwind. I'm getting back into swimming. I have a friend I swam with when I did master swimming at Northwestern. He's getting me back into the pool. So I enjoy that a lot. And But mostly I like when I'm alone, I'm working and I can't not do that. But when I'm with my family, I'm in and we're all like really focused. So if I have free time, I'll usually try to find a way to spend it with my family.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, John. This has been such a great conversation. Any last thoughts you would like to share with the listeners and viewers of the show?
You know what? I'm really lucky and I found a job I love. I feel like the luckiest person every day. Even the days that aren't, that are maybe rough, they're still wonderful. They really are. And when you find that thing that makes you happy in life, do it. Don't let go of it. It is the greatest. And I can say that for people who are musicians I know police officers, fire people, firemen. They're just great. Find that passion in your life and hold on to it.
Beautiful. Great advice. Oh my goodness, John, this has been such a luxury. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, a pleasure. Have a great Sunday.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez
Chulu.
and LF Production. Chill out.